The frozen planet Dracos had been dead for centuries. Its surface was covered in thick layers of ice, its skies filled with never-ending storms. Nothing lived here. Nothing moved. But deep beneath the ice, something had been waiting. The Xelthar Dominion had ruled the galaxy for hundreds of years. They had conquered many species, crushed many enemies. But one war had been different, the war against humanity. The Xelthar had fought with all their strength, and in the end, they had won. Humanity had been wiped out, erased from history. Their fleets had been destroyed, their worlds burned. It was a war the Xelthar never wanted to remember. But history does not stay buried forever. A scavenger crew, sent by the Dominion, landed on Dracos. Their job was simple: search for old wreckage, take anything valuable, and leave before the storms became too dangerous. Captain Velker, a veteran scavenger, stood at the entrance of a deep ice cavern. His crew had been scanning the ice for hours when they detected something massive below the surface. The scanner showed metal, a lot of it. Velker frowned. "This can't be right," he muttered. The war was fought here, but nothing this big should still be intact. His second-in-command, Rin, looked at the readings. "Captain, this is no ordinary wreckage. Whatever is down there, it's buried deep, and it's still active." Velker felt a chill, not from the cold, but from something else. Fear. They used thermal drills to melt through the thick ice. It took 6 hours to reach the metal beneath, but when the ice finally cracked away, the crew stared in silence. Beneath them, hidden for centuries, was a colossal warship. Its hull was dark, untouched by time. Symbols and markings covered its surface. Symbols that Xelthar knew well, but never wanted to see again. It was human. Velker stepped forward, his breath fogging in the freezing air. "Impossible," he whispered. The Dominion had destroyed every human warship centuries ago. There was no way one could have survived. Yet here it was, perfectly preserved, perfectly intact. Then the ground rumbled. The ice beneath them shifted, cracks spreading outward. Rin grabbed Velker's arm. "Captain, something's happening." A deep mechanical hum filled the cavern. The warship's hull began to glow, bright blue lines pulsing to life. The ship was waking up. Velker's instincts screamed at him to run. He turned to his crew, back to the ship. Now. But it was too late. The warship moved. Its massive engines, silent for centuries, roared to life. Ice shattered, sending shards flying in all directions. The ship began to rise, breaking free from its icy tomb. The scavengers ran, slipping on the ice, desperate to escape. Above them, the sky darkened as more ice cracked open across the planet. Velker looked up in horror. It wasn't just one ship. It was an entire fleet. Hundreds of warships, buried beneath the ice, were now awakening all at once. Their systems rebooted, their weapons powered up, their engines blazing to life. And then, a voice. A cold, mechanical voice that echoed through every communicator, through every system in the sector. "Human Armada. Reactivation complete. Scanning for hostile forces. Target identified. Xelthar Dominion. Preparing for engagement." Velker's blood turned to ice. The war wasn't over. It had just begun. Velker's boots slid across the frozen ground as he sprinted toward the scavenger ship. The deafening roar of awakening warships filled the cavern, shaking the very ground beneath him. Behind him, the ice cracked and shattered as colossal human warships broke free from their ancient prison. Their engines burned with blue fire, melting the ice around them as they rose toward the stormy skies. Rin's voice crackled through Velker's communicator. "Captain, the fleet. There's too many of them. What do we do?" Velker leaped onto the ship's loading ramp, turning to look one last time. The sight stole his breath away. Hundreds of warships, sleek, deadly, and fully operational, hovered above the planet, their weapons activating, their formations shifting into a battle stance. The Dominion had believed humanity was dead, but they had only been sleeping. And now, they were awake. He slammed his fist on the ship's control panel. "Get us off this cursed rock. Now." The scavenger ship's thrusters fired, lifting them away from the ice fields. But as they rose, a deep mechanical voice echoed across every channel in the system. "Human Armada. Reactivation confirmed. Galactic war status. Incomplete. Enemy forces identified. Zelfar Dominion. Initiating counterattack." Velker's heart pounded. That wasn't a distress call. That was a declaration of war. As the ship broke through the storm clouds, Velker's worst fears were confirmed. The entire Armada had now fully emerged from the planet's surface, their weapons glowing with power. The fleet, frozen for centuries, had never been destroyed. It had simply waited, until now. Velker turned to his crew, his voice grim. "Send an emergency transmission to High Command. The war isn't over. The humans are back." But before his crew could respond, the ship's alarms blared. A new fleet was approaching. The Zelfar Dominion's patrol forces, responding to the Scavenger's distress beacon. Velker's blood ran cold. The Dominion's fleet had no idea what they were about to face. They were flying straight into a massacre. He watched in horror as the first Zelfar warships entered orbit, their weapons primed, unaware of the nightmare waiting for them. The human fleet shifted, their targeting systems locking on. The Zelfar Dominion had ruled the galaxy for centuries. Now, it was their turn to tremble. Velker's fingers dug into the armrest of his chair as his ship hovered in the upper atmosphere, watching the nightmare unfold. The Zelfar Dominion's patrol fleet had arrived. 30 heavily armed warships, confident in their strength, unaware of the ancient terror that had just awakened beneath them. The human fleet remained silent, unmoving. It was as if they were studying their prey. Velker had seen countless battles before, but this was something different. The humans weren't panicked. They weren't sending warnings. They were waiting. Aboard the Dominion's flagship, Grand Marshal Kavar barked orders, his voice filled with arrogance. "Unknown warships, identify yourselves. This is Zelfar Dominion space. Lower your weapons or be annihilated." For a moment, there was silence. Then the cold, mechanical voice returned. "Zelfar Dominion, classified as hostile. Commencing tactical eradication." Velker's breath caught in his throat. The human fleet moved. No warning, no negotiations, just destruction. The first human warship unleashed a single pulse of energy, a lance of blue fire that ripped through space like a blade through flesh. The Dominion flagship, a fortress of war, didn't even have time to react. The energy beam pierced its shields, cut through layers of armor, and detonated its power core instantly. One shot, one kill. The Dominion flagship exploded in a flash of blinding light, sending shockwaves through the fleet. Velker's crew gasped in horror. The most powerful ship in the sector had been erased in a second. Panic spread through the Zelfar fleet. They opened fire, unleashing a storm of plasma and missiles toward the human Armada. But the ancient warships had technology far beyond anything the Dominion had ever seen. Velker watched in disbelief as the human fleet weaved through the chaos with terrifying precision, their shields absorbing fire as if it were nothing. Then, the counterattack began. The human warships unleashed hell. Blue energy beams rained down on the Dominion forces, slicing through their ranks with mathematical precision. Ship after ship exploded, vaporized in seconds. There was no battle. It was a slaughter. Velker's hands shook as he gritted his teeth. This isn't war. This is execution. One of his crew whispered in terror, "Captain, if the Dominion falls, what happens to the rest of the galaxy?" Velker had no answer. Above them, the last Zelfar warships tried to flee, but the human fleet was faster. The final ship, a desperate survivor, attempted to jump to hyperspace. But before it could escape, a human vessel locked onto it and fired a single energy burst. The fleeing ship vanished in a brilliant explosion. Velker's communicator crackled. The human eye had turned its attention to them. Unidentified vessel. Scanning complete. Self-R affiliation. Detected. Status. Extermination pending. Velker's eyes widened in horror. They were next. Velker's heart pounded in his chest as the cold, mechanical voice repeated its sentence. Self-R affiliation. Detected. Status. Extermination pending. His crew froze, fears spreading like a virus. The human fleet had destroyed the Dominion's patrol force in seconds, and now their sights were set on Velker's small scavenger ship. No, 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 Velker muttered. He slammed his fist on the ship's controls. Get us out of here. Activate the hyperdrive. His pilot, Uren, was already working, hands shaking over the controls. It's charging, Captain, but it needs time. There was no time. Outside, one of the human warships turned toward them. Its weapons began to glow, energy building up for a kill shot. Brace for impact. Velker yelled. The human ship fired, but at the last second, another energy blast intercepted the shot, knocking it off course. The scavenger ship shook violently, but it wasn't destroyed. The humans had missed. No, they had been stopped. Velker's eyes darted to the scanners. A new signal had appeared. Something else was interfering with the human fleet's attack. And then a mechanical voice returned. But this time, its tone had changed. Override protocol activated. High command authorization detected. Halt all engagements. Velker's breath hitched. High command. He looked at the scanners again. There was something else, hidden deep within the human fleet. A single massive warship, far larger than the others. Its hull was ancient, covered in battle scars. It had been there the whole time, silent, watching. Then something happened that made Velker's blood turn to ice. A voice came through the comms. But this time, it wasn't robotic. It was human. Who dares awaken the lost fleet? Velker's crew stared at each other, their fear turning to confusion. This wasn't just a machine army. There was something more at play here. Velker swallowed hard and did the only thing he could. He reached for the communicator, and he answered. Velker's hand hovered over the communicator. His crew stared at him, their faces pale with fear. A voice, a real human voice, had just come through the comms. For centuries, the Selfar Dominion had believed humanity was extinct, and yet here they were. Not just ships, not just a living commander. Velker took a shaky breath and pressed the communicator. This is Captain Velker of the Dominion scavenger ship Striker. He hesitated, choosing his words carefully. We were investigating the ruins. We didn't mean to. The voice on the other end cut him off. You stand in the presence of the Eternal Fleet. A cold shiver ran down Velker's spine. The Eternal Fleet. The name wasn't familiar. No records in Dominion history mentioned it. The voice continued. This sector was under human control before the fall. State your rank and allegiance. Velker's throat went dry. Human control. Before the fall. This fleet wasn't just old. It had been here before humanity's disappearance. Listen, Velker said, keeping his voice steady. I am not your enemy. The Selfar Dominion believes humans were wiped out centuries ago. Silence. Then, the voice spoke again, this time with something dangerous in its tone. The Dominion still exists. Velker cursed in his mind. He had just confirmed something to whoever was on the other end. The human commander had not known. And now, the humans had a reason to fight. Velker turned to his crew. We have to leave. Now. But before his pilot could even attempt to escape, a massive shadow fell over them. The colossal flagship that had remained silent now moved forward. Its sheer size dwarfed everything else, a relic from another age. From its hull, thousands of turrets and energy weapons turned toward them. Then, the human commander spoke one last time. We were betrayed. We were forgotten. But we did not die. Now, we will finish what we started. The communicator cut off, and every warning alarm on Velker's ship blared to life. The fleet was preparing for war. And Velker's ship was right in the middle of it. Velker's ship shook violently as the massive human flagship powered up its systems. He could see it now, fully awake, a city-sized warship, its hull covered in ancient battle scars, its weapons glowing with deadly energy. Around it, the rest of the human fleet shifted into battle formation, moving with the precision of a machine, but the ruthlessness of something far worse. His pilot, Urin, shouted over the alarms. "Captain, hyperdrive is almost charged. Just a few more seconds." Velker wasn't sure they had seconds. The human commander's voice returned, colder than before. "That Selfar Dominion still exists. The war was never finished. That means our mission remains. Galactic Control Protocol. Reinstated. Primary target. Zelfar Dominion." Velker's hands tightened into fists. This fleet wasn't just waking up. It was resuming a war that had been frozen in time. A war the Dominion had thought was won centuries ago. A warning light flashed red. One of the human warships had locked onto them. Captain Rin, the weapons officer, paled as he read the data. "They're preparing to fire. We won't survive a direct hit." Velker gritted his teeth. He had to think fast. There was no way to fight back. There was only one chance. He hit the comms. "Listen to me. That Selfar Dominion is stronger than before. If you go to war now, you will lose." Silence. The human fleet did not fire. Then the commander spoke. "Explain." Velker forced himself to stay calm. "The Dominion isn't the same empire you remember. They have millions of warships, entire planets under their rule. If you attack now, they will destroy you before you even reach their core worlds." He didn't know if it was true. The power of this ancient fleet was terrifying, but the Dominion had ruled the galaxy for centuries. If there was any hope of survival, Velker had to stall them, make them hesitate. Another long silence. Then the commander's voice returned. "We will assess the threat level. Do not move." Velker swallowed hard. If they hesitated even for a moment, it might give his ship just enough time to escape. His pilot's voice crackled with urgency. "Hyperdrive charge. Ready to jump." Velker made his choice in an instant. Jump. Now. The scavenger ship's engines roared as it blinked into hyperspace, disappearing from the battlefield. As the stars stretched around them, Velker let out a shaky breath. They were alive. For now. But in his heart, he knew the truth. The human fleet was awake. And now, they were coming for the entire galaxy. Velker's ship burst out of hyperspace, its engines glowing red-hot from the sudden jump. The crew sat in stunned silence, their breaths uneven, their minds still trapped in the horror they had just escaped. The eternal fleet was awake, and it was preparing for war. Urin broke the silence first. "Captain, what do we do now?" Velker didn't have an answer. No one in the galaxy was ready for this. The Selfar Dominion had ruled unchallenged for centuries, believing humanity was a forgotten relic of history. But now, a force from the past had returned, a fleet with technology beyond anything the Dominion had ever faced. "We need to warn them," Velker finally said, his voice hollow. "If we don't, the Dominion is doomed." Rin, his weapons officer, hesitated. "Do you really think they'll believe us? The Dominion doesn't listen to scavengers. They don't even believe humans exist." Velker gritted his teeth. She was right. The Dominion was arrogant, blind to anything they didn't control. A single scavenger ship's report wouldn't even reach the high command, let alone make them act. He turned to his pilot. "Where's the nearest Dominion military outpost?" Urin pulled up the star charts. "Zelfar 9. It's a mid-tier command station. If we send a high-priority distress signal, they might take us seriously." "Might." Velker nodded sharply. "Set course. We have no time to waste." As the ship turned toward Zelfar 9, Velker glanced at the sensor logs. Every bit of data they had gathered. The firepower, the formations, the voice of the human commander. It was all recorded. It was evidence. Maybe they wouldn't believe him. Maybe they'd ignore the warning. But if the Dominion didn't prepare, the Eternal Fleet would erase them from existence. And Velker had seen what happened to those who stood in their way. The war was coming. And this time, humanity was ready to finish it. Velker's ship dropped out of hyperspace, arriving near Zelthar 9, a fortified Dominion outpost orbiting a barren moon. The station loomed like a metal fortress, bristling with weapons and warships. This was one of the Dominion's regional command centers. If anyone could relay their warning to the High Council, it was them. But Velker knew the truth. The Dominion did not take warnings seriously. A crackling transmission came through. Unidentified vessel, state your purpose. Velker took a breath and activated the comms. This is Captain Velker of the Striker. We have encountered an unknown threat of extreme danger, an awakened human warfleet. We have sensor logs to prove it. Request immediate audience with command. Silence. Then a second voice, calm, arrogant. This is Admiral Karth. You claim humans still exist. A chuckle followed. Captain, humanity is extinct. There are no human fleets. You will explain your deception in person. Velker's stomach twisted. They weren't taking him seriously. Yurin muttered, told you. They won't listen. But Velker wasn't giving up. Check our sensor logs. We barely escaped with our lives. The fleet is massive, far beyond your technology. If we don't prepare, they will come for you next. A long pause. Then, Karth sighed. Dock at Bay 12. But be warned, Captain. If this is a trick, you will not leave alive. The transmission cut off. Velker clenched his fists. They don't believe us. Rin's voice was cold. They will, when it's too late. As the ship approached the station, Velker's mind raced. If the Dominion refused to act, then there would be no stopping the Eternal Fleet. Because somewhere, beyond the cold abyss of space, humanity's lost Armada was already preparing for war. And this time, they would not lose.